Then he answered them, "Do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews?" For he realized that it was out of jealousy that the chief priests had handed him over. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have him release Barabbas for them instead. Pilate spoke to them again, "Then what do you wish me to do with the man you call king of the Jews?" And they shouted back, "Crucify him." Pilate asked them, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Crucify him." So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released Barabbas for them, and after flogging Jesus, he handed him over to be crucified. It's a stark, difficult, humbling text, is it not? But this is the season for texts like this. We're in the season of Lent. This is the 5th Sunday of Lent. It's a season for reflection, for putting off old clothes, putting on new clothes, for examination, and hopefully for transformation. And so this text is very appropriate. It's a text that we often cram into a whole lot of Holy Week texts, post-triumphal entry, post-Palm Sunday. We cram them all in usually to a Good Friday service. We haven't done that this year. I don't know if you know this, but since Lent started, we've been in Holy Week texts. We've been in texts that take place after Palm Sunday. Next week, we'll go back to Palm Sunday because we always do. But that's what we've been doing. We've been in these texts wanting to take our time. Just as the gospel writers rushed to Holy Week, they covered 33 years in a matter of chapters. They all slowed down when they got to Holy Week, when Jesus entered Jerusalem. And so we've been doing this, whether you're aware of it or not. We've been doing this the last 5 weeks. We have slowed down, and we have been in these Holy Week texts all this time. And so we come to this one, and it is brutal, is it not? It is brutal. And I want to unpack it a little bit. And often when we look at this text, we can't help but put ourselves in the crowd and ask ourselves, who would we choose? And at the end of the day, none of us can answer that question because we weren't there. We weren't there. But I want to just give a little more information to help us understand what might have been going on, why they chose the way they chose, and then we can consider why we choose the way we choose. So I want to start with the title of my sermon. It might have thrown you off if you looked ahead. The title of my sermon is Which Jesus? Which Jesus? And so now I'll explain my title to start. So we have these two characters to choose from, Barabbas and Jesus. So I want to talk about Barabbas for a second and talk about names in the first century. This is your little nerd lesson for today, okay? You ready? So people had a name. They had one name. Jesus was Jesus. Matthew was Matthew. And they all had these one names. And often you'd encounter other people with the same one name as you. So then you had to distinguish one from the other. And how would you distinguish one from the other? Well, there'd be 3 ways you would distinguish, one Matthew from another at Matthew. One would be from where they're from. So if you had 2 Jesus in the room, you say, well, Jesus from Galilee or Jesus of Nazareth, right? We hear that, Jesus of Nazareth. Mary Magdalene just means Mary from Magdala. So that's how they would distinguish between different Marys. There's lots of different Marys, even in our New Testament. They would distinguish by occupation. Simon the tanner, whatever. Paul the optician. Matthew the tax collector, to separate him from other Matthews that might have been floating around or in the room at the time. We do this today too, right? Yeah. And of course, who their father was. Simon bar Joseph. Simon bar means son of Joseph. So anytime you see a name in the New Testament that is bar somebody, it's not their name. It's how they're identified in reference to the other people in the room. So we look at this character, Bar Abbas, son of Abbas. We don't know for sure what his name actually was. They refer to him as son of Abbas. One possibility, since there were two people to choose from, it's quite possible his name was Jesus too. It's just a theory. I'm not saying that's gospel and that's fact, but it's possible that his name was Jesus bar Abbas, as opposed to Jesus bar Joseph or Jesus bar Yahweh, Jesus, Son of God. Possible. I'm going to work with that theory this morning, okay? So these are our two Jesus that the crowd had to choose between. Jesus bar Abbas, Jesus bar Joseph. So again, to understand a little bit more about why the crowd made the decision that they did, we need to understand first century mindset, first century understanding, first century messianic expectation. We talked about all this in the first service this morning. So if you were there, you'd be already up to speed. The number one concern of the Jewish people in the first century was not how to get to heaven. It was not, how do I feel better about myself? It was not, any other number of things. The number one concern of Jews in the first century was how do we get out from under the thumb of Rome? That was it. If this oppressor was removed from us, then we would be free to be God's people in all that he intended us to be. Rome was the problem. And they had a belief and an understanding that grew over time, maybe through some understandings of Old Testament passages, maybe through what they experienced with the Maccabean revolt, that their Messiah would come and deliver them militarily from Rome. That was their messianic hope in the first century, that a military leader would come and deliver them from Rome. Okay? Everybody with me? Okay, good. What do we know about Jesus Barabbas? Well, look at verse 7 again. It should be up here. A man called Barabbas was in prison with the insurrectionists who had committed murder in the uprising. Now, if you watch a lot of movies about the Passion of Christ and this scene, often Barabbas is portrayed as this crazed, murderous lunatic. Like, this terrible, evil-looking creature who's just murderous, killed all kinds of people. But notice those words, insurrectionists and uprising. What was this guy really all about? What was he like? He wasn't a murderous, raving lunatic. He was a freedom fighter. He was a zealot. He was a hero. He was someone willing to die to set his people free from Rome. He was someone willing to kill to set his people free from Rome. He was a hero, maybe a Messiah. He was a man's man. He represented strength. He represented that Greek ideal of a leader that Mark mentioned last week. He was the embodiment of that first century messianic expectation. That was Jesus Barabbas. What do we know about Jesus Bar Joseph? Jesus, son of Joseph. Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus, Son of God. How did he present himself when he came in to Jerusalem finally? After word being out for years of this person in the north who was healing the sick and feeding the multitudes and calming the seas, all these stories. This could be the guy, this great leader, and he's coming to Jerusalem today. And how's he entering the city? Humbly, on the colt of a donkey. Did this guy match the expectation? No, not at all. I was speaking with Yolanda about this a few days ago. We get to this passage on Friday morning, right? He enters the city on Sunday, and by Friday morning, they've all turned on him. And we think, how? How could that transformation happen so fast? How could they turn on him and be so fickle so fast? I think they might have turned on him by the time he got to the end of the road on the Sunday. This was not who we expected. And you can't downplay the power of expectation. How does Jesus Bar Joseph come to us? Humbly and on a donkey. How does Jesus Bar Joseph tell us we should respond to our enemies? Look at his words from the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5, verses 38 to 45. You've heard that it was said, eye for eye and tooth for tooth, but I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. And this is where he really sums it up. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. That you may be children of your Father in heaven. The people that day had a choice. The way of Jesus Barabbas or the way of Jesus Bar Joseph, Jesus Bar Yahweh. The way of Jesus Barabbas is the way of power taken and enforced through violence. The way of Jesus Bar Yahweh, Jesus the Son of God, is limitless power given away in selfless love. Two completely opposing ways to live out your life and to see kingdom flourish. Looking at this, we I think it helps us understand a little bit about the crowd and the decision that they made. It doesn't make it right by any means. It's horrific and still just as terrible. I think we often, as Christians 2,000 years on, we give those first century Jews a real hard time, don't we? And again, I mean, so does Jesus a lot of the time. He does. But, and we say, well, how did they not see? How didn't they see all the prophecies? Isaiah 53. He's on the cross. The only one that seems to get it is the centurion. Surely this is the Son of God. Jesus, Bar Yahweh. Only the centurion seemed to get it. How did they miss it? All those prophecies, all fulfilled in Jesus. How did they miss it? And yet, here we are, 2,000 years on. Not only do we have those prophecies, not only do we have the life of Jesus of Nazareth, not only do we have 2,000 years of ruminating and discussing and theologizing all these texts, and yet how many times do we still choose power enforced by violence over limitless power given out in selfless love? As God's people, we need to grapple with our relationship with violence, both personally, corporately, societally, globally, right now. Is this not more relevant a message than it is right now? It's easy to just, well, Jesus' words there in the Sermon on the Mount, well, they were really too hard, and that was just so we need the cross and so on. He doesn't say that. There's no conditions put on this. It's love your enemies and pray for them. That's it. You can't love your enemy and shoot them at the same time. It's true. You can't. And so we need to wrestle with this. Personally, our own relationship with violence. And I will confess, I will not be as vulnerable as the last two speakers, which I really appreciate. I would like to say I'm not a violent person. But history does not bear that out. I have had encounters where I've thought people were invading my home and I was ready to beat them to a pulp. It just rises in me. I've had times where people have stolen from me and everything in me just wants to destroy them. I know the violence that's in my own heart. Do I want to be a nonviolent person? Yes. Am I? Not yet. Not yet. But that's not the end of it, okay? When Jesus said to go the extra mile, he was talking about a very specific rule in the first century that said that Roman soldiers could only require of the Hebrew people that they carry their stuff for a mile. So Jesus is talking about the relationship between the Jewish people and the Roman Empire. How do you respond? Selfless love. Give it away. That Roman soldier tells you to carry his pack for a mile. You carry it 2 miles. You love your enemy regardless. Jesus' words were not just for our private, individual little lives. These are words to save the world. Jesus did not conquer the world through the sword. Jesus conquered the world, overcame sin and death through sacrificial love on the cross. And we, as the children of God, are called to do the same. The implications of all that for our relationship with war and violence, I feel there's lots of different ways that can be applied and a lot of challenges that people have to work through. How is our faith in Jesus? How is the way of Jesus the way of selfless love. How does that work out in our personal lives and our relationships, but also in how we support our government, how we truly believe peace is achieved. And those details are for each of us, I feel, to work out with fear and trembling for ourselves. But these are the words of our Lord. You have heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say, love your enemy and pray for those who persecute you. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, while we were still enemies, Christ died for us. The word of the Lord.